Hello. Before I start my talk, I would like to say big thank you to all the organizers and everybody who helped with this conference. Thank you for not canceling it. Thank you for bringing it online. It is highly, highly appreciated. Thank you so much. The title of my talk is Growing a Library Ecosystem, and it's a high-level overview of things that I've learned after like 10 plus years of working on various library ecosystems. My name is Piotr Solnica. I'm a software engineer from Krakow, Poland. I work for a company called Theorem. We are a consultancy, a software consultancy from the US, so I work remotely from Krakow. You can find my open source work on GitHub. You can also follow me on Twitter and check out my website at solnik.codes. I also work a lot on open source. My main projects are RubyConfBY, which is a data mapping toolkit for Ruby. I also work on DryRB, which is a collection of Ruby libraries solving a bunch of different problems. For example, I created a library called Dry Validation for data validation, or Dry Types for handling things like coercions, or Dry System, which provides a nice architecture for any Ruby application. I also started helping with the Hanami project last year. Specifically, I'm helping with its upcoming version 2.0. Let's take a look at the agenda. This is a high-level overview. Please keep that in mind. I have 25 minutes, so it's not enough time to dive really deep into this subject. So if you have any questions, really feel free to ask me anything after the talk. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about my open source timeline, the projects that I worked on that were part of some kind of a ecosystem. Then I will tell you what's a library ecosystem, according to my own definition at least. Then I will tell you about the challenges that I have faced while working and maintaining library ecosystems. Then I'm going to have some tips for you when it comes to maintenance. And last but not least, I'm going to answer the question, is it worth the effort? So let's start with my open source timeline. Over the years, I've worked on many different projects. However, I was mostly focused on working on projects that were part of some kind of an ecosystem. So in 2010, I joined a project called Data Mapper. It was one of the Ruby ORMs. It had over 30 libraries, 36 to be exact. I remember that working on this project was really challenging due to the fact that it consisted of many libraries. Things like pushing a new release was always, challenging, time-consuming, and a little bit stressful, to be honest. So I've learned a lot about maintenance work and everything that comes with it. So it was a really interesting experience. After Data Mapper, I started working on a project called RubyConfBY, which I already mentioned. Data Mapper was supposed to be upgraded to 2.0 version. However, 2.0 version would be so different from version 1 that we decided to just start a new project. So RubyConfBY was born in 2013, and I've been working on RubyConfBY since then, and it has grown into a small ecosystem that consists of 25 libraries right now. In 2015, I helped establishing DryRB organization, and I started helping really actively by adding more libraries and maintaining the whole organization. So eventually, DryRB has 27 libraries. I can quickly mention that soon it's going to be 24 because DryWeb and DryWeb Roda will be effectively replaced by Hanami 2. And also we have plans to merge Dry Equalizer Gem into Dry Core. So we will end up with 24 libraries eventually. Last year, like I mentioned, I joined Hanami project and I started helping with version 2.0. And Hanami has 11 libraries right now. Hanami is a bit different from RubyConfBY and DryRB because it's a full-stack web framework, so it's focused on very specific problem domain here. Now, when I was preparing this slide, I realized that I worked on at least 99 libraries, which is kind of nuts. However, it is interesting, at least for me, that most of my work was within these organizations. So most of my work focused on growing library ecosystems. So this is interesting, and I want to talk about this today. But first, let's just start by explaining what's a library ecosystem anyway. So again, according to my own definition, a library ecosystem is a set of libraries that share a common foundation. And I think that this common foundation is what really defines a library ecosystem. I don't think that any group of libraries without a common foundation can be called an ecosystem. Like the fact that you have an organization on GitHub, let's say, and under that organization you have a bunch of projects, it doesn't mean that it's an ecosystem just because it's under the same organization. For me, a library ecosystem means that there is some common idea, common foundation behind this ecosystem. I can give you a concrete example. In case of DryRB, this common foundation is blending functional programming with object orientation. So there are a lot of DryRB libraries that expose objects that work as functions, and they avoid mutable state, and they are easily composable through functional constructs. So this is the common foundation for DryRB. Another example would be RomRB with its simplified approach to working with the data, which, surprise, surprise, is also functional, but it is the very foundation behind this ecosystem because everything else is built on top of it. Keeping that in mind, you will be able to identify a bunch of ecosystems in the Ruby world. It's worth to notice that Ruby Gems is an ecosystem as well, because the common foundation is the technology. So the fact that we have a bunch of libraries written in Ruby creates an ecosystem. However, you can have smaller ecosystems within that ecosystem. So this is what happens with projects like on this slide. So I have faced a lot of challenges ever since I started working on Data Mapper and then ROM and Dry and Hanami. Building and growing and maintaining an ecosystem has a lot of challenges, but I'm gonna list 5 biggest challenges that I have faced, at least. Even though it's just my experience, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who worked on other ecosystems have faced similar challenges, if not identical. So the first challenge is that it just takes extra time to build, to grow, and to maintain a library ecosystem. And it's something that you may easily forget about and just not think about it, but this is a challenge. You're going to spend extra time. There will be things that will take extra time, like just the fact that you have to deal with a lot of libraries. Even if it's just, I don't know, 5. This is already more than 1. So obviously you're going to spend more time on it. But because it takes extra time, you really need to be smart about it. You really need to pay attention to how you spend that time, on what kind of tasks, and how you can improve that and be more efficient. Number 2 is identifying what should be a standalone library. This is not that simple, and sometimes it can take years, and you may just go back and forth with various decisions. And here's a good example. ROM was initially created as a single gem, but very early in its life, ROM relation was introduced as a separate gem. A couple of years later, I merged ROM relation into ROM core because it felt like this is a core library. This should be part of the core gem. So it was merged into ROM core. And just last month, I merged ROM core into ROM gem because we realized that having separate gems in case of ROM just increased the cost of maintenance, and it made other projects that depend on ROM have more complex dependency trees. So it made a lot of sense to just merge core gems into one gem, because it will save time. It will make things simpler for us. Number 3, it's a problem that I still need to solve: documentation. In case of a library ecosystem, writing documentation is even more challenging than in case of writing documentation for a single project, especially if you have situations where one library relies on another library from the same ecosystem. And I can give you a good example. Dry validation relies heavily on dry schema, and dry schema relies heavily on dry types, and dry types relies heavily on dry logic. So we have 4 gems here, and if you want to become like a power user, you really need to learn all 4 gems. So writing documentation for all these gems in a way that is just easy for the reader is challenging. It's not clear to me still how to organize documentation in a situation like this. I have some rough ideas how to solve this though, but I haven't done anything concrete yet. So yeah, fingers crossed, because I'm gonna try to solve this later this year. Number 4, testing and integration. You really need to run your tests against multiple versions of a given dependency. And you really want to make sure that while things are changing in your ecosystem, nothing becomes broken. So testing and integration becomes just more challenging because of this. The good news is that these days we have really powerful CI tools. We recently switched to GitHub Actions for the CI part, and we are very happy with it. So I would say that this problem is solved. However, it's been a challenge. And number 5 is versioning and release process. These things are just more complex in case of a library ecosystem. You will face situations where you're going to ask yourself, is it a good idea to bump this gem to 1.0 even though it depends on some other gem that is not stable yet? This kind of questions are not, simple to answer. So you will face some challenges related to versioning and release process, as it's just more complex in case of a library ecosystem. Okay, so what about maintenance? Again, this is a really big subject, but I'm gonna highlight the most important things that have been working very well. So treat this as a list of tips that I have for you, and it can actually be applied not just to library ecosystem, but if you have a bunch of libraries that you maintain, even if they are not part of an ecosystem, you may still benefit from these suggestions. So number 1, absolutely the most important thing is to keep things unified and keep things consistent. So what it means is that you want to have a similar directory structure, you want to have similar file structure, you want to keep the same type of information in the same places across all the repositories. You want to have unified README files, you want to have unified change logs, you want to have unified release process, you want to have unified approach to dealing with issues, pull requests. All this stuff should be unified, and you should be consistent. Every time you see one of the libraries diverging from the standards that you have established, treat this as a smell. This is not a good thing to have, because every time something diverges from the standards, you're going to spend extra time just to deal with that. So keeping things unified and consistent is super important so that you can automate everything. I mean, everything. I'm not saying to automate absolutely everything, but try to find all the boring chores, all the boring recurring tasks, and just think about what could be automated so that you will be spending less time on maintaining the automation infrastructure than you would be spending on doing things manually. So this is really important, and luckily we have amazing tools these days, specifically GitHub Actions. Again, this is a really powerful tool, and if you haven't checked it out yet, really do it for yourself because it's super nice. Here's an example of how we automated a couple of things in dry-RB organization. So for example, the release process is, well, partially automated. It is based on tag creation right now. So if you create a tag and you push it to GitHub, it's going to trigger a release process. Just this is already helpful because there's just less work that you got to do when you want to push a new release. So that's cool. We also automated documentation updates on dryrb.org. This is based on pull requests. Whenever you open a pull request to change documentation in a given dryrb repository, you will be able to automatically update documentation for different versions through a single pull request, and it's going to trigger a new build of the dryrb.org website. So this is really nice. We also realized that maintaining common files like gem specs, README files, contributing files, code of conduct, all those files exist in all the repositories. And we have over 30 repositories in dryrb. So what is happening now, what is automated now, is that we have templates for these files in a single repository, and they are rendered for individual repositories and pushed to these repositories automatically through a GitHub action. So this is a massive, massive time saver. The same thing was done with CI. CI setup is now centralized, and we still have ability to tweak it on a per repository basis. So this is pretty cool because honestly, maintaining a CI configuration file for lots of repositories is painful. It's time consuming. So once you have it centralized, you will save a lot of time. And the very same thing with Rubacop configuration and any other metric tool that we may use. This is now centralized and automatically updated for every repository. So that's pretty cool. It's really a massive time saver, and it's been working very well for us since I think January. It is highly recommended that you check out GitHub Actions because it's absolutely amazing and the possibilities are just endless. Number 3, be mindful of dependencies. This is a pretty generic not rule, but a guideline. Be mindful of dependencies. Don't add dependencies just because. Sometimes it feels like something is useful and you could just add it as a dependency. But you should always remember that every dependency is a liability. Every dependency will add some extra work in the future. And the worst case scenario is that with a lot of dependencies, you will end up in a dependency hell and you will be blocked if you want to, let's say, upgrade some important dependency that you really want to upgrade, but it turns out that you cannot because you are blocked by some other dependencies. So just be mindful of that. Number 4 is to keep an eye on the big picture. And this is something that I realized really recently, like a month or 2 months ago maybe. I realized that I was focused so much on the individual libraries that I actually forgot about the big picture. And there is always a big picture behind any ecosystem. So it's worth to keep that in mind and sometimes just zoom out and see where the whole ecosystem is going. Is it going in the right direction? Is it still in line with the original idea? And it's something that you should just review on a regular basis, because it can give you a nice insights into what's really happening with your ecosystem. Something that I found to be really useful is to just use visualization. So I would draw a diagram of the whole ecosystem with some, a bunch of arrows and text descriptions of various things, just to help me visualize everything. And then it is just helpful in making various decisions, like what we should tackle next, what should be upgraded to a stable version, what should be improved in terms of, I don't know, performance. This kind of stuff is really difficult to decide if you're just looking at individual libraries while working on them. So this kind of insight is very important if you want to maintain your ecosystem efficiently. Number 5 is to make it as simple as possible for people to contribute to your ecosystem. This is unfortunately not as simple as it sounds, because organizing everything in a way that people can easily just open up a list of issues, grab something, and just open the pull request after 2 hours of work, this is not easy. However, it's for sure worth the effort, because it's an initial investment that will pay off eventually. And I have a pretty recent example. When the pandemic started, I really didn't have much time or energy to do any substantial open source work. And because of this, I got to just focus more on reviewing pull requests. I always review pull requests. It's just that I do this like automatically without thinking and noticing how many pull requests are being opened and merged. And while working on all these reviews and merging pull requests and pushing the releases that didn't include any new comments from me, it felt so good. Like, it felt like things work the way they should work. This is open source, and like, people should be contributing if they want projects to stay alive. So I think there are still many things that can be improved in all the ecosystems that I'm helping with, but having nice code bases, good test suites, a nice list of issues with labels that are helpful, and of course documentation, which includes inline comments in the code itself. All those things help people contributing to your project. So pay attention to this, because obviously it's gonna make maintenance simpler. So yeah, that was it. There are obviously many more challenges, but I can tell you more after the talk. So now it's time for the difficult question. So is it worth the effort? I talked about challenges that I faced. I talked about various tips when it comes to maintenance. So there are some things that you really need to pay attention to if you want this to really work. So there's obviously extra time and extra effort that is needed if you want to grow and maintain a library ecosystem. So this is a difficult question, but I have a very simple answer, and the answer is yes. However, it all depends, right? I think that if this happens in a natural way, that you start with a project and after 4 years, you end up with 12 projects under the same project. If it happened naturally, based on some natural requirements, natural needs that you discovered, then it is definitely worth to just identify and realize that, okay, I'm dealing with an ecosystem now, and I can organize it in a way that I can still work on it efficiently and be productive while working on it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me anything after the talk. And yeah, talk to you later. Thank you.